In this episode, I give my spoiler-free thoughts on How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. Full speed ahead. Welcome to the Omega Beam, number 34. I'm your host, Orren Merton, and I've loved both How to Train Your Dragon animated films that have come in the last 10 years, and I was very excited to hear that they're wrapping it up as a trilogy, and this is my spoiler-free review / discussion / thoughts about the film. Here we go. All right, so for those of you who haven't seen the previous two movies, which I very much recommend you do, the concept of the How to Train Your Dragon series, and it's also been a limited TV series as well. I think there have been 2 TV series that have been between the movies. So the concept is that this is sort of a prehistory, Dark Ages Viking village way up north called Berk. And in this village, instead of trying to kill the dragons that, of course, in this world exist, instead of trying to kill them, enslave them, they live with them. They live in harmony with them in their town, their little village. And this is because of the teaching, the training you could call it, of Hiccup, who is the son of the great chieftain. And one of the things I love about this series of films is that what happens, it's called How to Train Your Dragon, but what it's really about is training each other. It's about how to live together. And the dragons train the people, and Hiccup does as much training of the villagers, of the Vikings, as he does the dragons. So I think it really shows people getting along with each other and everything else, and how those people from different perspectives who want to do harm, that really it's the harm they want to do that's the bad guy. In fact, in the second movie, one of the dragon hunters, who's voiced by Kit Harington, who for Game of Thrones fans know as Jon Snow, his character switches once he is sort of, if you will, trained to see the dragons as they really are. So it's a wonderful series, and kind of the heart of it all is the relationship between Hiccup, our main character, and Toothless, which is, in my opinion, arguably one of the very, very best dragons in all of literature. He is as much a companion dog as he is a dragon, but their relationship is gorgeous, and you see them learn to understand each other over the course of these movies. They train each other, and it's just that kind of deep, meaningful relationship, that you basically find between a person and a dog, if you're a dog lover or a cat. So it's a movie that you can identify with, even if you're not, you don't have your own dragon sitting around your house. And if you're like me, you sure wish you did. So anyway, one of the nice things I like about the series as well is that, unlike most animated series, it accounts for the passage of time. And what I mean by that is, in the first movie, Hiccup is very much a child. He's maybe early teens, maybe just becoming a teenager. He's sort of just learning to kind of maybe think that girls are kind of nice and things like that. And he's very much the young son of Stoic, the great chieftain. And his adventures are sort of the adventures of the chieftain's son, and everyone kind of puts up with him, even though he's so different and he has such radical ideas, because he is the chieftain's son. And it's about him coming into his own and everything else. And then in the second movie, everybody's older. He's maybe, let's say, late teens. He and one of the other characters, a female character named Astrid, who's also awesome and an ass kicker, they're like a thing, sort of. People kind of understand that they're together in a way, even though it's not, marriage or anything, but they're kind of dating, and everybody encourages that. And It's about an older Hiccup sort of finding his place in the world, and part of it is by the end of the movie he ends up as chieftain. And if you haven't seen the movie and you don't know how, I don't want to spoil that for you. But he does end up as chieftain, and he literally becomes the guy that everybody looks to when he hasn't quite learned how to look for to himself. And so this third movie is again years later. He's the chieftain. His mother is sort of an advisor, and he and Astrid are very much together at this point. I mean, they're solid. I mean, they're not necessarily married yet, but they're solid. And everybody looks to Hiccup, that he is the uncontested. Well, I mean, there's a joke about contesting his leadership, but it never goes to Mortal Kombat or anything like that. But now he's got to protect both his people and his dragons because they live in harmony with the dragons. But of course, that's where the big conflict comes in, that there's dragon hunters, dragon enslavers, and they want all of their dragons, but also there's one particular one who has killed all the Night Furies, and the Night Fury breed of dragon is the one that Toothless has. He's killed all the others except for Toothless. And so this guy really, really wants Hiccup's dragon, and he has the perfect bait. And that bait is a female dragon called a Light Fury, which is kind of like a white version of the Night Fury. And then it creates a lot of tensions of what does Toothless want, what is their bond, how are they bonded to each other, to their society, everything else. And Toothless is a king of dragons. Toothless is the alpha of the dragons. And so for a animated movie that is more or less bloodless, that is aimed at young adults, this movie tackles some pretty significant issues, even if it's not, as deep as, maybe a serious drama documentary. I think it really goes into serious issues. And it's got a good story. And, by the end of it, of course, a movie like this, there's always tears. And the tears are earned. They gave you enough story and enough plot, and you learn enough about the characters and about their relationship, and they grow enough that when there's tear-jerking scenes, they are earned. It's not just, we've had an action movie that you're sort of disassociated from, but now we're going to swell the emotional music to see if we can get emotional. No, the emotions are earned. And I also need to point out the animation. This animation is really, really best in class. Every movie, they've upped the game. And this one, I would say this is the pinnacle of CGI animation right now, today. This is today's pinnacle, because not only do you have, realistic hair and hair movements and textures and things that we've come to expect, but there's literally armies moving, armies of ships, armies of dragons. There's huge numbers of things moving, all textured, all with independent movement. That's the thing. It's the independent movement. You can freeze frame it, and trust me, when this is on home video, I will be. You can freeze frame it, and everything is moving independently, and it's so wonderful, and it's so state of the art. It's just fantastic. I want to take a second and bring in arguably one of my favorite movies now, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, because first of all, that just won the Academy Award for Best Animation. And I want to talk about how this one stacks up to it. So, Into the Spider-Verse is the outside-the-box masterpiece. They did CGI, but then they did hand animation on top of it, and they did different processes. They played with frame rates. Into the Spider-Verse is completely out of the box in ways that no other CGI animated movie, including How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is. So I would phrase it this way. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is the pinnacle of today's in-the-box CGI animation technology, whereas Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is an example of out-of-the-box animation. So there's no armies of independent CGI doing all kinds of crazy things. In Spider-Verse, the CGI of How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is a cut above, but then Spider-Verse has all kinds of other stuff. But if you are a fan of animation, especially of digital animation, you owe it to yourself to see this movie. I mean, you will be pleased with how good the story is and with how good the voice acting is and how good the music is. And every element really comes together to make a good movie. But as an animation, aficionado or major or whatever it is, or actively making a living in animation, this is the pinnacle of that style, that kind of animation. So it's worth seeing just for that as well. As I said, this is a really fitting end to the How to Train Your Dragon series, and I've really enjoyed this series. I haven't read any of the books. Golden has. But I know that they get a lot of praise, and all of these movies have gotten good praise. After I saw the movie, I did check out the Rotten Tomatoes, and I think when I saw it, it was at 92%. So, I mean, the critics also in general have been, well, not in general, I mean, the critics have been very, very much in favor of this movie, and the audiences love it, and I'm here to tell you that it's all right. It's all true. This movie is absolutely worth your time and your money. It is very, very good. Speaking of the voice acting, I'll say one more thing. So the character of Snotlout in the television series and in both of the movies was played by T.J. Miller. And for those of you who don't know, T.J. Miller has had a rough few years. He's done some odd things that have landed him with arrests on his record. Women have come out and accused him of misconduct. And so he apparently had recorded the part of Snotlout for this movie as well, but the studio stepped in and had him replaced by another comedian who did a fairly passable job of imitating T.J. Miller's his delivery. So I have to admit that took me out a little bit because, first of all, having seen everything up to this point, it was just a little jarring to hear another voice. Also, this guy had an unenviable job because they'd already done the animation. So he had to literally voice match, word match everything that T.J. Miller had already said and that the animators had animated. So he didn't really have an opportunity to kind of give it his own take. And so I think he does a very passable job of being T.J. Miller, if you will. But because it's another voice actor trying to be T.J. Miller, it doesn't come off quite as natural as if they'd replaced T.J. Miller very early on and just gave it to another guy and said, make it your own. So if you are a T.J. Miller fan or if you're expecting his voice, be forewarned, this will not be his voice, and that may jar you a little bit. But as I said, the movie itself is so good, and that is just one little element of the big picture. That doesn't affect the story, that doesn't affect the quality of the animation, and it doesn't affect the emotional impact of the story that they tell. So anyway, I highly recommend this movie if you are a fan of the series, if you are a fan of animated movies, if you're a fan of fantasy movies. If you have kids, bring your kids. There's nothing here too scary. It might be a little over the heads or a little scary for the younger kids because, there's battle scenes and all the rest. But I think if you have, kids that are over 8 or 10 or whatever, they're going to love it. And it's a grown-up story as well. So you will enjoy yourselves as well. All right. And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam/34. If you liked this episode, please leave a review in the Apple Podcasts app or iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have any comments or questions or suggestions for other movies you'd like us to cover or panels you'd like us to do, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. I can already tell you that we have opening weekend tickets for next week's Captain Marvel, and we are very, very excited about that. So you can be pretty sure that there's going to be a Captain Marvel episode of the Omega Beam in the very near future. So be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.